Hi everybody, this is Dr. Fitz. Today I'm going to be doing a short presentation for you, hopefully fairly short, on how you'll be putting together your case study report for our class, teaching English learners in mainstream classes. So I'm going to be looking at our materials in our Google Drive. So if you're on As You Learn, you could go to the Google Drive, and in our Google Drive you can then look at the case study assignment. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So thus far, you all have been hopefully using the assignment outline to help you with your data collection. So right now you are collecting an interview with your classroom teacher to learn about his or her perspective on working with your English learner focal student and working with diverse students in general. You're collecting the classroom observation, and that is so you can have detailed and specific observation notes to compare and contrast against what you learned through your interview. So make sure that on your interview should contain only notes from the interview, and things that you observe you can include on your classroom observation form. In addition to talking to your teacher and observing your teacher's instruction, you're also observing your students' oral and written language so that you can assess what you think their proficiency is. And then if you're able to collect the child's access scores, then you can compare and contrast your informal or formative assessment of their language compared to that more formal assessment of their language proficiency. So after you're done collecting all your data, or even while you're collecting it, you can start to develop your case study report. And your case study report is going to have 3 sections, and we'll look at the rubric in just a second. You're going to have a section to describe your student, and in this section you want to really take a strength-based approach of what are the child's strengths that we could build on. Of course, they might have needs as well, but we want to try to have a positive outlook on the child and remember that if kids have the ability to become bilingual, that is a benefit to them that we should try to nurture and grow rather than a problem that needs to be stomped upon. So anyway, here you want to include any information that you gleaned from your teacher or from talking to your student about the child's background, their funds of knowledge. That could be things like activities that they like to do with their family, or cultural knowledge that they have that they learn and do in their community or in their home. You want to go ahead and describe the child's language proficiency in their home language, and you can give examples here. So this is a lot easier if you are able to observe the child using their home language or interacting with text in their home language. You can always, we have a number of bilingual texts in the IMC, so if you're curious to learn more about your student's home language, you can always check one of those out and see how the child interacts with that text. And even if your child is not a Spanish speaker, they also have texts that are in different languages, so you can see if they can recognize written words. You can also use the internet, obviously, too, for that. And you can ask them to write something for you in their home language just to see if they're willing to do that and how fluent that looks to you. So anyway, don't forget to address that to the extent that you are able to. And then you're going to describe their English language proficiency. Here you're going to be talking about the information that you gained from doing the oral language sample and the writing sample. But you want to talk about each area: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So you can give examples from your observation of the child in the classroom, and you can give examples from the assessments that you collected. So all of that is going to go in the first section of your paper, and to sort of help you with that, you can use this profile sheet if you want to help you sort of organize the information that you have gathered about your student. The second section of your paper is going to be focused on the instructional context, the classroom and the school, primarily your classroom, but like if you are in a context where the teachers are team teaching, you should describe that. That sort of thing. So you want to describe the classroom environment, the feeling tone of the environment, how the teacher makes the children feel a part of the classroom, or what the teacher's expectations are in terms of how kids interact with the teacher and how kids interact with each other in that space. You might describe a bit about the physical environment, but keep that fairly concise. So if the teacher does like to use a lot of environmental print, that'd be something to note, but I don't need to know like where the bookshelf is or what have you. So yeah, and then you're going to focus on the extent to which you observed your teacher engaged in instruction that would be considered enriched and appropriate for kids who are developing English as an additional language. So thinking about what we've learned about sheltered instruction, how does the teacher provide comprehensible input? How does the teacher make connections to the students' prior knowledge, to their language, to their culture? How does the teacher grow the kids' English language proficiency and push them on to developing more complex ways of expressing themselves? So thinking about all of those things, you're going to describe what you observed, and you're going to use examples from the classroom observation that you conducted. You should include specific examples from that observation. So the data you collected should be included in your report. Don't just say, look over here at this other thing. You want to take examples that you made note of, include them in the narrative report as specific examples. So that's part of your grade, is how well you use your data, as well as how well you're able to apply course concepts to help you think about your data. Your final section is going to be recommendations for your student. First, you want to start out by kind of summarizing what you learned as a transition and talking about, okay, based on all of the things that you discussed in the first two sections, here are some things in terms of the classroom environment that I've noticed would be useful for my student. This could be related to, placement in terms of, does a child need time to work on their own? Do they enjoy working with, and are they productive with working with groups? Are they doing well with the ESL pullout, or would they be better suited to having a co-teaching model if that were available? Any of those things would relate to the learning environment piece. That aspect should be concise but specific. And then you want to develop 3 recommendations for the child. And those recommendations should be related to helping them grow their English language proficiency and/or their proficiency, their bilingualism and biliteracy, content area knowledge, social skills, acculturation, anything that is relevant to the child and relevant to our class as well. Your recommendations should not be coming out of the blue. So if you found that your student is at the beginning or developing level in writing, then you should develop a recommendation for helping them grow their writing skills. If you found that, and that should be something that you discussed in the student section and in the instructional context. So don't come out with a recommendation for something that was never mentioned in any of the other portions of your paper. Finally, if you have a moment and you feel like giving any feedback on the assignment, you can. And then you want to include some references. These would be things that you had cited in your paper. So that, and then finally you'll include the data that you collected. So all of this should be one document. I recommend that you put it all together in a PDF. Clean it all up, make sure it's all in the same font, and then you're going to submit it to As You Learn, and you're going to submit it to TK20. Okay, we're getting long in the tooth here, but let me just give you a couple of notes on the rubric, and then I have 1 minute to wrap up. Okay, so we talked about each section of your paper. These are going to be the narrative sections of your paper, are the student, the classroom, and recommendations. If you look at our rubric, you'll see there's this whole area that's called analysis. The analysis aspect of the case study report is not a separate narrative section. It is that myself and the other CI 3000 faculty would like to see how you are applying course concepts to understanding and interpreting the data that you collected. So, you know, we'll be discussing this more in class, but you want to think back towards some of the things that we learned in our class as you're discussing these different areas. So for an example, you might think about how your teacher, what their approach would be with regards to behaviorism, anatomism, or interactionism. You might think about how your classroom, how the affective filter in your classroom is, and to what extent students are provided with opportunities to interact with one another, and why that might be a good thing, or maybe it's not working. With regards to the student section, applying what you learned about language acquisition to understanding their language growth would be something I'd be looking for. Applying this idea about funds of knowledge accurately would be another good example. So as you're making these connections and explaining them, that's why you might have to cite some of your sources. That constitutes your analysis. You'll also be using connections in the recommendations section because you want to provide specific recommendations and support from research-based practices, which could come out of our text, or they could come from people's instructional strategy reports, assignments.